Good evening, everybody. Welcome to NoVA to our April meetup event. My name is Jim Lane. I'm joined this evening by co-organizer Alex Shao. I believe our social media organizer, Danita Patel, is going to join us as well. For those of you who are not familiar with our group, NoVA is a meetup for UX professionals in the Northern Virginia and Washington, D.C. metro areas. We have members joining events from elsewhere in the US and overseas as well, so we're always excited to join us. Our group has been hosting monthly talks and workshops since NoVA was founded in 2012. We are delighted that you all could join us this evening. Before I introduce tonight's talk, let me take care of a few of the usual housekeeping details. As our regular attendees know, we've been doing remote meetups now since early 2020. It is a new year. We are monitoring COVID-19 closely. We hope to start organizing a combination of remote talks and in-person events this year if we can. However, as always, safety first. So please stay tuned to our meetup group page and Twitter channel for updates in the coming months. But for now, we're still remote, obviously. Next month, in May, we have a talk by Dory Kellner, who gave a Drupal talk at NoVA back in 2016. The topic of her talk is Imposter Syndrome, and it's called You Are Not a Fraud. In June, that is our 10th birthday celebration. So we will once again be participating in 24 Hours of UX, which is a global UX event. June 8th, it covers the whole globe, time zone by time zone. 7,000 or 8,000 designers participate. We're incredibly excited to participate again this year. We will be featuring a group presentation from the design team behind CNN, the new streaming service that just recently launched. So we're incredibly excited to hear from them. Tonight's talk is going to be recorded. It will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. Give us a little bit of time. It takes a little time to download it and get it uploaded. If you have any questions this evening, through Rajiv's talk, please post them in the chat channel. Alex is going to be keeping an eye on that channel. He'll pull together questions. We will do Q&A at the end of Rajiv's talk. So please, any questions that come to mind, please enter them there, and we will go through them in the order that they are received. If you are hiring this evening, we would love to hear from you. Also post in chat if there's a particular job or role that you're hiring for. Please just put the details in chat so others can see it and jot it down. We'd love to hear. And finally, if you have any, or if you would like to share your thoughts about tonight's event on social media, our Twitter accounts are on the slide in front of you. NoVA Meetup is our handle on Twitter. Rajiv's is, I'm not going to try to pronounce it, Rajbajbone, Rajbajbone. Jody, who wasn't able to be with us tonight, hers is Jody with a Y. Alex is at Perfect, and mine is at Jim Lane Nova. So tonight, we welcome Rajeev Subramanian, UX research lead at Capital One, founder of Shift UX Career Advisory Program, and adjunct professor at Georgetown University. We are so glad you could join us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jim. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, the rest of the NoVA team. Congrats on the upcoming 10-year, and looks like some great talks coming up as well. So today I will be sharing my screen in just a second. I just want to speak a minute about the topic. So personal branding is something that I would say is a passion of mine because it was transformational in my own career as a career switcher several years ago into the field of UX. I know many of us are all along the spectrum of, in our UX career, maybe just joining, switching careers, progressing. Maybe we've established a career for many years or decades. And I'll get to that in a minute. So I just wanted to say that I'm happy to be sharing this topic with you all today. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And I will. Perfect. Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Perfect. So I'm going to go into present mode. Oops, if it actually. There we go. Thank you all, and everyone can see it. I'm in present mode. Get this out. So, designing a personal brand. We talked about that. So, I wanted to. My picture's not even showing up, but which is odd. I promise my picture is normally there. I'm hoping the pictures show up. If not, I might just go into the other mode. So my name is Rajeev Subramanian. I'm the founder of Shift UX, as Jim so nicely introduced me. I've started this career advisor program partly because over the last couple of years, partly because there's been many people who've come into the field of UX, and it's obviously growing. And I think it's great that everyone is trying to get into the field or progress into the field, but there's also been some challenges in terms of people firmly trying to establish themselves, what they represent, where they kind of are in the whole sphere of UX, because it's, as we all know, it's very, very massive. And it includes many, many disciplines. I'm an adjunct faculty also at Georgetown University. So they have a master's program called DMC, Design Management and Communications. So I teach UX design there in that master's program. And many of the people in that program, I would say most, are actually non-designers. It's mainly for marketing folks, business folks. There are some graphic designers and designers in there as well. But I think it's absolutely fascinating that I think it's a telltale sign of that, how rapidly UX is growing, not only within our field, but others are also understanding and trying to learn as much as UX as possible. And I think that's it's advantageous for anyone in the field of UX as well. Like I said, I'm a career changer. I'm also an ambivert, trying to figure if I was an extrovert or introvert for many years. About, I don't know, 5 years ago, I figured out that I have both traits, and ambivert is essentially, depending on the situation and the context of where you are, I can flex different parts of introversion and extroversion. I know some of you may be in this camp, and some of you maybe don't know exactly where you fall, and some are extroverts and introverts, but it's just, I thought I'd mention that out there, and because I'm going to mention it a little bit later. So let's move on. So in this presentation, I'm going to talk about a couple things. I'm going to start with a little small story just to kind of get the juices flowing and give a little bit of context into where I'm kind of leading this conversation. I'm going to talk about a couple of myths, 3 myths, in fact, of what personal branding, it's been around a long time and it's changed. And if you do a search on Google, you'll find 10 different meanings from 10 different people on 10 different websites. And then I'm going to talk about, just really briefly, about the truths as I see personal branding. And then very importantly, I want to actually just mention after that, okay, why should you care, right? And I think this is very, very important. I'm going to mention kind of surrounding forces of why we should pay attention to this and why we should, take this very seriously. And then lastly, I'll talk through a brief step-by-step approach of what I would consider if you were trying to dip your toes and get your feet wet into maybe creating your own personal brand, what you could do. And then I'll just mention a couple of final words, and then I think we'd be ready to wrap it up. So that being said, I'll continue along. I want to know, you can put this in the chat if you are, but which group are you, right? Are you just starting out and you want to know, okay, hey, give me what you got. I'm all ears. Let me listen to what you have to say. And I'll take whatever advice you give, and I'll take it and run with it. You could also fall into the group of, I have a decent personal brand, right now. I've worked on it. I know a couple of things. I maybe know some red flags and things not to do. I know some things to do, but how do I improve? Or you could say, hey, I'm well established in my career. I've done this, please tell me something unique and new that maybe I haven't heard before. And my goal is, depending on what we're talking about, it's going to hit on all 3 of these groups, and I'm hoping to provide value to all 3 of these groups in any form or fashion. So I think it's very important to know, from my perspective, that it doesn't matter where you are in your journey. Personal branding is like a kind of a lifelong thing that you should kind of take take very seriously. So, oh, it's not even showing it. This is, I need to show this. I'm going to exit out of this just to show this. Can everyone see a picture of orange shoes? I think that's important to see.
Yep.
Okay, I think,
Yep.
okay, good. So the idea here is, I just want to talk about a story, and let me move this down here. So here we go. I want to talk about this story. There's a story I saw on LinkedIn maybe about 5 years ago. It was a man was actually going to a lot of networking. He was a startup founder and trying to go to these different events, again, pre-COVID, when you could actually go into large networking events and meet people. He was going in and making phone calls, trying to basically pitch to different investors, his startup idea. Lo and behold, one day he basically decided he's going to kind of go out on a limb, go to a networking event and put on orange shoes on. I think he was like, he also put like an orange hat, or he had an orange band or something like that. And of course, as shocking as this may seem, and bold as this may seem, he actually, he was targeting a couple of investors who actually ended up coming up to him, and kind of making a comment about his shoes, and he made a little quick back and joked, and the conversation got started. And long story short, that he ended up basically working with that investor who invested in his startup. Now, the point of the story, he made it very clear. He's like, now, did I get my investment from the VC because I wore my orange shoes? No. It's like I had to do a lot of introspection and understanding, practice my pitch, perfect so many different parts of it before he decided to kind of make this drastic move. And I think really the lesson here is this was kind of like the final step in order to get noticed. So, for example, let me see if I can go. There we go. This might even help. So the lesson here would basically be to provide a shock effect for a reaction. Now, this is something that I eventually teach, in my advisory program, when I actually talk about personal brand and how to, when you finally actually put it together and you have this kind of package that's kind of ready to show to the world, how do you kind of get noticed and give a shock effect to people, rather than kind of blindly messaging people, crossing your fingers, hoping for the best. And so the lesson here is kind of provide that shock effect for a reaction, because if you don't, there's a famous quote that I found, which is, if you're not a brand, you are a commodity. And a commodity, I think the dictionary definition of a commodity is something along the lines of, it's like goods that can be equally interchanged with other goods of equal value, or something along those lines, which is what we do not want to be. We do not want to be carbon copies. We do not want to be a commodity. We do not want to be quote unquote goods that are basically just going to be interchanged with anyone else who's looking for, whether you're looking for a job or whether you, have other goals that you need. This is exactly what you don't want. So I think it's very important to kind of, remember this. I want to move on to some personal branding myths. So, of course, I say no lies detected, but these actually they kind of smell funny sometimes. And I'm going to start with the most obvious one, which many of you may already know. Your job title and what you do are synonymous with your personal brand. I think we all may have an inkling that, yes, I know a personal brand is probably something deeper. It's more connected with kind of not just who you are, but why you do what you do. And now, excuse me, your job title and what you do are tiny pieces of those. It's the outcome. It's what the outward world sees and how you kind of explain yourself. But if you kind of traverse the path of like, okay, your job title and what you do explain the what, and then maybe you do that in service of what, maybe because you have some goal, you have this job title and you have your responsibilities and your role in service of some goal. And this kind of ties to the whole idea in UX of, we always talk about outcomes and output and everything. Again, this is this is kind of the output, right? This is what is there. Maybe it's a check off the box, but it is not the outcome. It is not the end value. It's not like kind of the core of who you are. Now, myth number 2 is personal branding is about selling yourself. I've known many people, including myself, that at least initially, and people to this day, have not once ever tried to sell themselves, or whatever you consider selling yourself is, putting yourself out there, trying to attract possible, if you're a freelancer, attracting clients, if you're just trying to look for work, attracting attention to who you are and what you do and what value you could bring. If you actually take personal branding seriously, you do not have to sell yourself at all. And when we get into kind of the step-by-step, I'll talk about how the activities that you do will kind of formulate your positioning in the field. That's very, very uniquely you. And when you get to that point, you don't have to sell yourself, because kind of the market will adapt and kind of find you. And you can be very, very hyper targeted at that point. So, so that was myth number 2. Myth number 3 is your reputation is your personal brand. Now, this is kind of, I would say it's not a total myth. I would say your reputation is a sliver of your personal brand, or it's another side of the coin, because it's kind of, you can do a lot of activities and take a lot of action, do a lot of introspection within yourself, and you have a reputation that's already out there. Now, whether you know it or not, your reputation is out there right now. Now, you may not know it, but it's there. Now, you absolutely have control over what that reputation could be. People can have a bad reputation, they change it to a good reputation, good and bad, vice versa. So I just want to understand that there is a very, very interesting interplay between reputation and personal brand. Again, personal brand is more wholesome. The reputation is kind of on the flip side of how others perceive you, but you still have control over that in terms of how you can, change, question yourself in terms of how you position yourself to the outer world. Excuse me, I need water. I want to talk about, okay, those are the myths. So kind of very, very quickly, what are some personal branding truths? And I've kind of touched upon some of these terms, but I even, when I've looked across the internet and had my own experience and figured out some definitions, I kind of hodgepodge took a couple of things that I thought resonated the most, which I think is the intentional effort to understand your purpose and promote yourself in a way that establishes credibility and builds authority. I think there's a couple of key words here. Intentional, and I even have that word on here on the side, intention. Purpose, promote, credibility, and authority. And so those are very, very key takeaways. So the intentional part of it, this is the aim, this is the strategy. This is just not starting by just changing the title on your LinkedIn and then thinking that's going to, make a big difference. This is intentional from actually, starting with your personal values, who you are, your passions, what your strengths are, what you've done in the past, what your accomplishments have been. Once we're intentional about understanding that, then we can start to build our purpose. And once we kind of formulate that purpose, we can promote it. Once you start promoting it, it helps establish our credibility. Over time, that credibility turns into authority. So it's not like you have to do all this simultaneously. It all happens kind of step by step. So let's move on. And I want to excuse me for my voice. I don't know. So I started losing it, but I wanted to talk about market forces for a second. So why should you care, right? Okay, this is all great, Rajiv. Personal branding, it's awesome. Okay, what do I need to, number one, what do I need to do to change it? Number two, how do you know this is such a big deal? So I did a lot of research, as anyone in UX would do, understanding the growth of the freelance community. This is all solopreneurs or entrepreneurs, content creators, people who have side hustles, and the supply of designers. So when we talk about the first three, a lot of this was exacerbated and increased due to COVID because, again, people home, and I think we've all heard about that. Growth of platforms and networks becoming economies, and sort of the individual entrepreneurships and personal people obtaining these personal brands through side hustles and entrepreneurs and freelance community. The idea here is that it's exorbitantly increasing in terms of the number of people that are out there that are actually embracing personal brands and trying to find their voice. Now, if you couple that with the supply of designers, and this is over the last, I think, I'm not going to go with numbers here, but I think we can all agree that over the last 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, the demand, at least from the market standpoint, of UX design and design in general has dramatically increased. That's why hiring has increased like crazy, but the supply has also increased, and it's increased exorbitantly. So, the additions of not only just master's programs, but just programs in general, boot camps, courses, tutorials, and even people like who've done the side hustles, solopreneurs who've actually created communities that are also, having a following and getting people into this. It's really increasing a lot. So what that means to you is that I don't want you to fall under the illusion that you don't need to network, engage, share, connect, represent, and be the best version of yourself, because this is the trend that's happening. And as more and more people do it, it's almost like a market force that you need to do it at some point. And even if you're very, very established in a job that you currently have right now, or you're just looking in, at some point, whether it's now or in the future, you're going to have to think about this. And, they always have that quote is, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. And the second best time to plant a tree is now. So it's never too late to basically to start this journey. But especially over the last 2, 3, 4 years, because of all these different forces, you don't want to miss out on this. And in the end of it, it's not just something that you should feel forced to do, because of all these different things that are happening, but it's almost kind of, it's a trend where, almost like the economy is going, which I think is important for us. And it's going to end up having a lot of value for you at the end. So I wanted to mention this as an important point of, why you should care and why you should sort of embrace this, and not fall into the trap of thinking that it's like, yeah, that's fine. I don't want to do it now. Maybe I'll do it later. So I wanted to mention that. So step-by-step approach, how do you actually start doing this? It's great. Okay, maybe it's important. You want to do this. You kind of know what it is, what it isn't. I have basically 4 main areas which I talk about, and I kind of loosely follow a rudimentary UX design process. I know there's so many out there, and there's probably too many out there, but I want to start with a personal audit. And what that is a lot of this introspection, which I was talking about. This is kind of your research phase, if you will, right? If you're researching kind of yourself and what others, think about you, you're auditing your own personal strengths and traits and characteristics. And this is a very, very important step. If you've never done anything like this, it's not easy. And it's a test because sometimes we think we know ourselves, but this really puts it to the test in terms of posing different questions of, okay, do I really know myself? And if I'm kind of stuck, how do others see me? And once you kind of do that, you can formulate this unique value proposition, right? This is the analysis of getting all these traits and your values and your strengths. How do I cobble this together in a way and analyze what it actually means for me, to actually, make some sort of value proposition where that's going to be unique to me and what I offer the market. And then we have kind of the niching down, which is a very, very common marketing term, but it's very important to know here, which I'll explain. And this is kind of like the definition phase, or if you think of like the double diamond, this is like the convergence of like, the problem definition or figuring this out. In those contexts, it's kind of figuring out our user problems. And here we're figuring out like, where we kind of stand everywhere in all this. Niching down is essentially the UX or product equivalent of, if you design for everybody, you design for nobody. And we need to take that and we need to apply it to ourselves. We cannot, we cannot think like, okay, let's just say I'm looking for a job. I may just say I'm a UX designer and that's it. I'm going to go everywhere. That's when you put yourself out there for everybody, when you're designing your own personal brand for everybody, you're designing for nobody. So niching down is going to be an absolutely critical point that, and I'll go through each one of these and give a quick example. And then lastly is kind of like your build phase, your actual profile and your social profiles, your resume, your cover letters. Again, once you kind of figure this all out, you can put those together and you can build your social value. And I'll also talk about steps you can do at a bare minimum, to start to start on this journey of adding bit by bit, some of that social value and, which is part of your profile. So let's start with personal audit. So personal audit, I have a couple of questions to just think about here. And again, I know I'm going to share these slides afterwards, so feel free to go through these and really do this exercise, because some of these questions you may have a quick answer to. Some of them you may not know. You need to ask someone. Maybe you need to ask your parents, your siblings, your significant other, your friends, all of them. What traits have stayed with you since you were a child? How would those who know you well describe you? What jobs, or even if there's certain parts of your job in the past or present, have you enjoyed the most? This is critical to note. So it's not just like, I enjoyed this job, but hey, in that job, I didn't like a lot of it. Maybe I didn't like the company that I was with, or I didn't like this person, but this specific part of the job, I really liked. I really enjoyed. Try to pinpoint those, and it's kind of almost going to a mental exercise of going back and figuring out what that is. What motivates you to get to work? This is a little bit generic, but it could go a lot of different directions here. Strengths. What do people come to you for help with? So people, hey, Jim, Alex, John, whoever it did, how do I do this? I'm coming to you to help because you know this. I've always come to you for this. You must have had friends that have come to you for that. Maybe you're a good mediator and you solve a lot of conflicts or something. Then you put out a lot of fires and you can settle down a lot of people. You'll also learn about, if this is a strength, that's great. And you can use that to your advantage when you're coming up with your unique value proposition. What are you most complimented on? What do people say? You know what? When I think about this person, I think they're a great person. They're calm. They're patient. They adapt to any situation, whatever the case may be. And then values. Think about important life decisions even. It's not just business decisions, company, if you're working at a company, personal decisions, life decisions, marriage, house, could be anything. What criteria can you list that helps you make a decision one way or the other? Do you want to please someone? Are you more logic driven? These are all things that you need to kind of do this is a really, really big introspection exercise that you should start with. And next, once you kind of know that, there is, what I call the unique value proposition. And there's a million different templates out there. I've found a couple of things where I like, where, I use my blank strength and another strength for some action. And then using this key trait, I do some action and provide value by doing X. So what that kind of looks like as an example is, I use my passion for solving problems and my discipline to understand human behavior at its core for creating lasting impacts on users and businesses alike. Known for a philosophy of openness and swift ability to adapt to complex environments, I'm 100% committed to translating users' motivations, attitudes, and desires into actionable strategies. that create transformative business outcomes and exceed user expectations. I know that's a mouthful, but it's better to start with that and chop down later. But I bolded parts that may relate to some of the blanks. Their passion for solving problems, discipline to understand human behavior at its core. For example, I studied human factors and engineering psychology. It's a passion of mine to understand human behaviors, how they perceive, what are the capabilities, limitations, etc. I have a philosophy of openness. I like to hear what other people say. I'm more of a listener in social situations than a talker. And I also adapt to complex environments. People used to call me, a chameleon. Again, I remember that when I was trying to do this exercise, I was like, someone joked around, you're like a chameleon. You adapt to every surrounding, and you're able to thrive. Taking those and incorporating this into like a unique value proposition template or statement, I think it's going to be critical for you to kind of find where you, what you bring to the table that's, different than, than the other person next to you. Now, niching down is something which I mentioned before. This is extremely important in the business world, and especially in marketing, and especially for a lot of, if you're an entrepreneur, have a side hustle, and you do a lot of these things, you'll come across this a lot. But it's absolutely 100% applicable here as well. And usually, like I was saying before, when you design or when you try to solve something for everyone, you solve for no one. So in action, this comes like, I'm a UX designer, or I'm a senior UX designer. Something better, niching down, is basically getting more specific in terms of, I'm a senior UX designer and prototyping specialist. Maybe you found that's your passion. You like interaction design, and you like prototyping, and you like testing solutions, whatever the case may be. Or you could say, I'm an empathy-driven designer and prototyping specialist in the healthcare tech industry. Maybe you have an affinity towards a certain industry, or a certain vertical, or startups, or you could go on and but I just want to give the example of when you niche down, it actually ends up working to your benefit. Now you may think, number one, I don't know, like I'm just starting, like I have no idea what I'm going to like. Well, that's exactly why you need to do the exercise, because once you get down to this point, you're going to have all these different things, and you're going to try to figure out, okay, if I'm a UX designer, UX is a massive umbrella. You don't, people always talk about the generalist, and there are places where generalists may, thrive, but if you actually want to, specifically target certain people and have people specifically target you, you need to understand what part of UX that you like, right? And we all know that there's so many different parts. There's, even within, just within research, there's so many different parts. You can even go down a niche rabbit hole within research. Any part of UX design, whether it's interaction design, information architecture, if you like building user flows, if you like, content strategy, if you like UX writing, and then of course there's actual the UI parts of design too. Maybe you love, like I said, you can do prototyping, or maybe you love animation, or maybe you love UI or visual design, or you're a graphic design turned UX designer. I mean, I mentioned just maybe a dozen already of just possible areas where you can kind of you should look to grow an affinity towards. Now, again, like I said, if you don't know, this is where you just got to start exploring, because the only way to know, you're never going to figure it out just by looking at it and reading about it, whether I'm like, oh yeah, am I going to like that? Let me read about it and see if I'll like it. No, you got to do it and try it and see what you kind of are attracted towards, what you like, and some things you kind of like, and maybe some things you like a little bit better, and some things you don't like at all. It's never like, oh, I love this and I hate this. It's a lot of nuance there. So just keep that in mind when you're niching down. It seems counterintuitive to be like, well, if I get this so specific, then aren't I like stopping myself from so many opportunities? If I'm, let's say I'm looking for a job. Well, no, you're not. In fact, you're like I said, when you're going down that path of like establishing credibility and kind of building your personal brand around this specific niche, amazing things will happen over the course of the time if you give it. This doesn't happen overnight. This takes quite a while. This takes months. This takes weeks, months, and then of course over the course of your entire career, it can change. So I think it's important to mention why this is actually works to your benefit versus not. So profile and social. I'll kind of do the TLDR version, which is if you do nothing else, and you take nothing else from this presentation, at least do these things, which is on LinkedIn, follow companies that you like and comment on some of the posts that they do. Again, I'm going this is like, if you want to know the hack, this is the hack to just start building, just start commenting, start taking action, creating momentum. You can do this while you're doing all the other stuff. It's not like you have to do this, inventory yourself and figure out your unique value proposition and not do this. You can continue to do this while you're doing all the others, all the other steps as well. Follow a company, maybe you like, Spotify, and you follow them as a company on LinkedIn. You see, and you actually start commenting on some of the posts that they make, and don't just comment, being like, sounds good, amazing. It has to be, when I say comment, I'm assuming that, there should be some value behind it. Like, what is your position on that? Do you agree with it? And what part of it do you agree and not agree with? Does it take time? Yeah. There's no secret that this takes time. And also if you're kind of afraid to put yourself out there, because maybe, I don't want to post all this stuff. I don't want to post this content, wait, just reshare someone else's content and make a comment on it, and reshare it, mention them. These are just small things that you can start, without actually coming up with great, amazing content yourself. Just reshare someone else's post that you agree with. And, you see it all the time. People reshare other people's posts all the time. And, sometimes they even provide their 2 cents on it. Again, quick things that you could do that you should start today. One thing which I actually didn't mention here is, adding connection requests. Now there's a lot of different people that may have there's a different art and science in terms of you don't want to just blast out connection requests to people. Keep it intentional, but focus just one person per day. Now it could be a recruiter, a hiring manager, it could be someone else in UX, a thought leader, it could be someone even outside of UX design, someone in marketing, someone in tech, some hobby that you like. Amazing things happen when you just start doing these activities. The idea is just not overthinking it, is just doing it. It's going to automatically force you to get engaged. So, and then on the other side, there's Twitter. So again, I'm talking about the TLDR, like if you do nothing else, these 2 social networks. I'm not going to mention, like creating videos on YouTube or TikTok or, how to get involved in there. This is just like the bare minimum. Like if you're going to walk away today and tonight, you're going to go on Twitter and LinkedIn, you can do these things. And what I've noticed with Twitter is basically it's just slightly more unfiltered content. So like it could be slightly more personal, slightly more edgy in terms of just like possible positions that you hold that could be controversial, not controversial in a bad way, but just kind of gets people to think, maybe more thought-provoking type of stuff. Retweet people that you follow the same way, reshare someone else's comment on LinkedIn, retweet with comments. Just start there. Don't start with the post, just start with the comments, resharing, retweeting, and following people that you do. It may seem like a very small thing, but it will go a long way. Now, a final word which I want to talk about is, if someone mentioned to me the other day, hey, Rajiv, this, it not only just does it seem like a lot of, work and, it's about consistency, but I'm kind of just afraid to put myself out there. Like, what if I write a comment? What if I just started, I don't know a lot about, a certain topic. I don't want to write something and then I just get totally blasted, I don't want to, what if someone just totally denies me and, criticizes me? And my response to that was, well, then why are you in UX design? Because in UX, in design, how many times have we gone into a presentation just bracing for impact on criticism? Honestly the nature of our job, whether you're doing a research share out, because I'm in research, but I've also been in design before. If you're whether you're sharing out a prototype in Figma, or putting a presentation on, or doing a mural or Miro, it doesn't matter what it is. You're always going to get feedback, and people are going to get back to you like, how do you handle that? And you have to be able to handle that. And so if you can handle that, you can basically handle any, you can handle it. You can handle anything, and you can definitely handle this. The other thing that this will do is that it is a lifelong pursuit. It will get you out of your comfort zone, right? Everyone is looking for what is the quickest shortcut that I can do to basically just get me where I want to go. Like, it's in our human nature to do shortcuts, right? This is going to get you out of your comfort zone. You got to do things that you're not comfortable with if you don't like doing this stuff. And changing. And when I want to talk about personal brand, I haven't even talked about, like, I could do a whole nother session of just your LinkedIn profile, and like what pictures to use and what not to use, and what your tagline should or should not be, and all those types of things. But this was more just kind of like a 101 of like, you need to be able to put yourself out there and get yourself out out of your comfort zone. I added this book too because there's actually not that many great personal branding books, and there's just most of them, to be honest, are from people that are just trying to like sell whatever they're trying to sell. But Branding Pays is very good. It's by Karen Kang, and I've even taken some of the concepts really resonated with me, and I think it resonated with a lot of people. And I incorporated a couple of things that she mentioned here in this presentation as well, with my own spin to it. But Branding Pays is one, and if I'm going to add another one, it's not technically on personal branding, but there's another book called Made to Stick. It's about maybe 10 years old now, 2013, 2014. I think it's I can't remember the author, Chip Heath, Heath is, I think, is the last name. It's called Made to Stick. And it just has some good ideas of like how you can kind of create that shock effect and do things to make things, things stick with people, and how you become more memorable, and how brands become more memorable. So I would definitely recommend those. So that being said, I am now at the end of my presentation. I thank you for your time. Again, when I share this, these are going to be clickable links for my LinkedIn, my Facebook, and my Twitter, my website as well. I know there's a bunch of comments in the chat that I missed, but I would like to go over that as well. So thank you very much, and let's go over some of these questions.
This is fantastic, Rajiv. So we have a few questions in the chat window. Looks like we have a couple hands raised as well. So we'll go through the questions first. That's in the chat window. First, there's some comments that was around the step-by-step approach. You guys, a lot of kudos and shout outs for that. So Rajiv, thank you for sharing that. Sure. First question comes from Bridget. What tools are best for building personal brand? For example, blogs, podcasts, but what are some of the other tools and perhaps resources?
Yeah. Now it depends on what part of your personal brand you're talking about. If you're talking about content creation, yeah, I mean, absolutely, you can. Blog is one. So this is where I actually didn't mention this, is if you don't have a website, I 100% recommend a website, even if you're a researcher, or even if you're not directly in design. Maybe even if you're like kind of up the ladder in, if you're like director, senior director, doesn't matter. Have a website, because you need to be findable. And in this day and age, it's almost like the expectation. Now, do I agree with that? Do I think it's kind of really truly the best accessible way to do it? No, but this is kind of the reality that we are in right now. Podcast is also one. I could make some edits to this slide and provide some recommendations of even some podcasts that where you could, Spotify obviously is the podcast haven. And so connecting with people on there, following podcasts, connecting with people who started those podcasts, in the UX community, connecting with authors, people who've created books, and following them everywhere. Now, again, this is more from the engagement standpoint. Now, the personal brand part of it is all going to be, that's more introspection. What you're kind of mentioning in terms of the tool, this is going to be from the engagement standpoint of how you kind of get noticed, how you start kind of build a kind of network, build topics to follow. Those are the types of things that you can do for that. So I hope I answered that question. I wasn't sure if you were trying to talk about something else, but yeah.
Thanks, Rajiv. And I would say, having been in the position to interview more than thousands of resumes and profiles, I would say portfolios, a website is a must, and opportunities where you can extend and also kind of call out yourself. It's a huge, huge plus. Good call out. Yeah. Next question comes from Kinsey. Should we curate the companies we follow to establish our brand? Or if we just comment on the ones directly relevant to now we're branding ourselves, does that free us to follow whatever or interests? And is it necessary to tweet? And Kinsey, you have your hands raised. Feel free to add to the question here.
It's a separate question, actually, so I can wait.
Yeah, sure. So I think the curation part of it is extremely important because it will influence, maybe some of your personal brand, but because you just never know what comments or topics or posts or ideas that may come your way that you may resonate with. So it's absolutely good that curating these types of, what you're interested in as a starting point will help. Sometimes I've curated things where maybe I'm not interested in right now, but I follow just to kind of get out of my shell and get out of the kind of echo chamber of, you don't want to be kind of stuck with certain things that you only, out of your circle of what maybe you're familiar with. I do that on occasion, but I think this speaks to, if you're kind of unsure where you kind of fall in this, you absolutely need to do this, because it's going to be the first step to create the momentum. That's just going to have network effects that will be unpredictable, that will kind of influence your own personal brand.
One of the reasons I ask is because I am kind of not switching careers, but shifting. And so it sounds like I'm very niche when I was before, because I worked with the art museums and cultural policy, especially in Africa. And so I have lots of those, companies and groups and colleagues that I follow. So I don't see that as relevant to where I'm going, but at the same time, it's part of my professional identity and my networks that actually can be useful in other contexts. I'm finding that that's not always apparent to people I talk to now about what I'm going into. And I also do some consulting periodically in that area still, because I'm established. So I'm not sure where I fall with that.
Yeah. Number one, do not let go of that, because it's made you who you are, and you still have interest, and you still potentially could get work there, and you still could create possible connections. I would just add on to that. So not to totally change the algo of your life, but you can maybe pick and choose some additional topics of other areas to and people to connect with. But do not let go and start unfollowing things, and just because it's not relevant to maybe what you're shifting to, because it's still a part of who you are.
Yeah, I've been thinking of it as kind of an aggregate package. So
yeah, I would agree. Good question.
That's great. Thanks. Next question comes from Anastasia. If I'm new to UX, coming from a different industry and have little experience in designing, how do I prove to potential employers that I'm the designer I say I am, if I only have 2 to 3 projects at a boot camp?
Yeah, very common question that happens all the time. So there's two areas that I want to talk about here. Number one, you should realize that everything that you've learned, all learning is valuable that you've done in the boot camp. But you should think of that as I'm sure you already know, that's only the first step in the journey. it is not an end all be all golden ticket that I've done it, I have the projects, now I'm going to get hired, because that's not the reality. I think anyone would agree that, and people who are hiring, they're looking for real experience. Now, what does real experience mean? Real experience could be past experiences that if you can understand exactly, open up your mind to what actually UX is, and not just screens and interfaces, you could potentially open up possible areas of UX that you've done, even if it's like small areas in the past. That's real, that's your experience. Number two, project work is one area which you've already have, but finding real experiences, think about freelance gigs, volunteer sites, friends' websites. You basically have to go out of your way. You have to almost kind of be entrepreneurial to go out of your way to find projects and real work and real problems. Problems are around us all everywhere, right? You don't need a boot camp to tell you need to do this project in order to come up with a case study. I'm just going to look around my room right now. I'm looking at an old clock that I have, and I'm just going to think about, okay, let me do some research on the history of clocks and maybe design a clock. I mean, you could do things that are both mock and fictional, but you could also go out of your way and connect with people, find, like I said, find websites that need websites, apps, services that need improvements. And you kind of have to go out of your way in order to prove that, because at the end of the day, 3 projects cannot possibly prove the value, because you have not proven it to yourself yet.
Thanks, Rajiv. Next question comes from LH. Any tips on how to combine personal and work value in online posts? Tip on how to get design managers and peers to see what you're someone that they would want to work with. P.S. Please talk about LinkedIn too.
Okay, so could you repeat that again? So understanding personal and...
Yeah, are there any tips on how to combine personal and work value in an online post? And I guess the quotation mark was, the brackets was tips on how to get design managers and peers to see that you're someone that they will want to work with. Perhaps LH, if you wanted to add something to the question.
Okay. Well, let me first start by saying I see a change happening in terms of, a couple of years ago, even 4 or 5 years ago, people would totally separate professional brand and personal brand, or at least somewhat. They'd be like, well, this is, who you are, and your personal brand doesn't always make itself into the professional world. Keep them separate. And some people continue to do that, and we'll be totally happy to do that. I do see a change happening in terms of whether it's due to COVID, changes in market forces of having it be like an employee-driven economy, of showing who you are and bringing that personal brand flavor into your professional life. So I see some of that mix happening. What I would do is I would do this exercise of separating it out first to begin with, and then finding commonalities between the two. How are you in your professional life? How are you in your personal life? Are you the same? Almost do the introspection exercise, maybe like a work version of that and a personal version of that, and then find commonalities and threads that kind of connect both. And I would embrace those and try to figure out if you can kind of take that and run with it. Now you can do that on LinkedIn, of course, but yeah, as a post or depending on what the situation is.
That's awesome. Thank you. Next question comes from Faduma. Portfolios go hand in hand when it comes to personal branding. How will one stand out with their portfolio? Any essentials that should be added?
This is a very good question. All too often, and I'm sure there are many hiring managers and recruiters here that have seen, I call it the carbon copy alert, which is everyone essentially, portfolios usually go something like this. Hi, my name is fill in the blank. I'm a UX designer, and I enjoy making, experiences, and I love my 2 cats. Something along those lines, where it's not that you want to take away your personality, but front and center when someone else is looking at hundreds of portfolios, you need to immediately cut through the fog of misunderstanding, because someone else, they could go to an about section and find out a little bit more about you. What you want to show front and center is connect your personal brand, your unique value, what you're good at, your strengths, and how that ties to making an impact and creating value, creating impact to what a business wants. And it's not an easy exercise. And this is where I see a big also trend happening, is that designers coming in need to fully embrace product strategy and business strategy, because the more you kind of embrace that, you'll be able to make that connect, that very, very tough connection to make. But it first starts with you and what your strengths and traits are. Tie that to the work you do and how that work essentially will tie to some broader business goals. If you can do that, then I think that is like the first step in creating something unique that kind of stands out from the crowd.
Wonderful. We have a follow-up question from Kinsey. I think she has a question about posting on social media.
Yes, I do. First, I'm new to UX, the idea of shifting, and I'm really excited about it. It's been very stimulating in terms of, lots of ideation and thoughts pouring out. And I find that I have these, blog posts that write themselves in my head, so I capture them. Had several that happened several times, but I haven't posted anything because I think through writing. And so I'm writing all this down as it comes out, and it's coherent, but at the same time, I know it's very thick because that's how I write. And so I feel like I need to kind of comb it out so it's more digestible for whoever's reading it. And there's that component. And then I also am coming from a more scholarship-oriented background, so I tend to write kind of formally. And I'm not a formal person, and it's not a formal interaction when I'm working with people. And so you say not to overthink it, but at the same time, I do with some cause. So any suggestions?
Yeah, so this is actually something I've seen. So I'll give you an example. Like I work at Capital One, and less at Capital One. In my previous role, when I was doing research, there was a couple of people that came onto the research team who had PhDs and joined, and it was the same issue where they were just so concerned about rigor and going through the process and doing as much as possible and making sure everything, the analysis was extremely well done, and the synthesis was incredible, and all the explanations would be long, and slides would be, they're just packed with like 70 slide decks and those types of things. And I would be basically having like 10 slide decks for this, for my own things. And this is basically the art of, you can call it UX writing or information architecture, or understanding the essence of what you write, and the hierarchy of what you write. So this is very, very, understanding the hierarchy of what you write is a skill that needs to be learned. So if you start going on the rabbit hole, this is being a paragraph, and if you had to basically cut that paragraph in essence down to just one, just as an exercise, not that saying you have to necessarily read it. This is what you have to do. It becomes an exercise in what is the essence of what I'm trying to say. From there, you can say point 1, point 2, point 3, and that would be a starting point. But this is a skill that you have to just kind of use over time. There's no easy answer, but I would say start with, if you had to take each paragraph, the essence of it, put it in one sentence and force yourself to do that. It's very difficult, but you have to do that as a starting point.
Great. Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because that's kind of how I've been doing it. I've been taking those, recognizing that it's not the way I want to present, but knowing there's substance there. And so paring it down and thinking of it in bullet points almost, so that it forces that concision. And actually today I made a template with like, this is the topic, this is the takeaway, this is the story. And so I think it's going to work better, be a good exercise. Exactly. So thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
That's all the questions.
Wow, those are great questions and
Fantastic questions.
great questions. Yeah, all around.
All right. Well,
Oh,
then,
one thing I asked about tweeting. I can't stand Twitter. Do I really need to do that for this?
You don't have to force yourself to use a social media if you don't like it or if you don't like it. I don't, to be honest, I don't like it either. And I find it very, you have to have a lot of patience in order to gain traction there. So that's what I've noticed. So you have to be like 10 times more patient with Twitter if you ever end up using it, just FYI.
I noticed that Nielsen Norman, when they were recruiting their last cohort, said to give your portfolio and then your Twitter history, basically, on your Twitter feed, which I thought, man, I can't apply for that job at all. So.
Yeah.
excellent. All right. Well, we are going to leave it there. Thank you, Rajiv, so much. We really appreciate it. Thanks, Alex and Didita, for helping out with tonight's event. Thank you all for the terrific questions. We're glad you could join us this evening. We hope you found this talk enlightening. Our next meetup is May 18th. As we said, it features Dory Kellner, principal at Insightful Culture. She's going to be sharing a talk about imposter syndrome, which affects 58% of technology employees. Join us to discover why this is a construct of your mind and learn strategies for feeling aligned with your capabilities and your self-worth. As always, visit NoVA on Meetup to learn more and register on Zoom for meeting details. If you are interested in giving a talk, organizing a panel discussion, running a workshop, or some other fantastic idea, please reach out to us. We would love to hear from you. In the meantime, thank you for joining us this evening, and we hope to see you all next month. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys. That was different from any other webinar I've done the last couple of months, so I appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thanks. Bye.
Glad you enjoyed it.
Yep.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Rajiv. Appreciate it.
Good night, everybody.